Okay, with Annilee Newton, Thessalonika. How do I pronounce your novel? See, I already made a mistake.
Thessalonica.
I see Thea. So Thessalo. Go ahead.
Yeah, Thessalonica.
Thessalonica. Thessalonica. That's a great title. So what does it mean? What does Thessalonica mean?
Well, there's an area in Greece called Thessaloniki, and it's sort of a play off of that. But mostly it's the middle name of my main character, Cleo Hart. And her father gave her that middle name as sort of a tribute to their heritage.
And tell us what the novel, like, give us like a quick pitch of what the novel's about.
So Cleo, my main character, she is a 1950s student at a really prestigious college in the United States, and she gets an opportunity to apply for an internship in Greece, but she's refused the internship, so she decides to masquerade as her male classmate who did get the internship and do the internship anyways as John.
Gotcha. This sounds like a good movie. This is like
Um,
yeah, kind of like Tootsie or Mrs. Doubtfire, right? Where they or like yeah. Go ahead.
Yes, Tootsie, it's been compared to Tootsie by other people before. And Mrs. Doubtfire, I think that I'm just now kind of realizing how big of a impact that Mrs. Doubtfire made on my subconscious, but I definitely watched that movie when I was a kid.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I just showed my kids that movie a couple months ago, and it still holds up from that kind of kids youth point of view. Yeah, so yeah, I can totally see that. So yeah, so basically, but it's sort of a theme on kind of like a matriarchal, like a male dominated. It's not that we're not doing that, don't still have that today, 7 years laher, but even more so in 1954, where like she like this very smart, kind of like educated, whole life in front of her, but she's still living in man's world, and she kind of takes the bull by the horns and becomes a man because she deserves to be in that, deserves to get the same opportunities, I guess, right?
Yeah, she's very feisty. She doesn't just take her refusal lying down. She fights in some ways that makes her life worse for herself. I mean, the first chapter is available, and you can already see the ways that her society is kind of pushing down on her and trying to make her into something she isn't. And then eventually she just decides that she's going to make herself into something that she isn't so that she can do the things that she wants to do.
Yeah, it's amazing. So where did you got it? How did you get inspired to write a novel about setting in this time, kind of a story that obviously written in the 2020s, but it's showing this kind of like the perspective of the world that we live in now, but from that kind of era.
Well, I remember there's this one author, she's kind of obscure. Her name is Mary Stewart. And when people know her, they kind of know her for her Merlin trilogy. But she wrote this sort of niche genre in the 1950s and 60s. And it was romantic suspense, but it was romantic not in the way that romances are now, like maybe somebody got a kiss on the cheek or whatever, but suspense that embroiled the female main character in weird political and social kind of excitement and thrillers and conflict. And I just loved those books so much. And probably over the course of my life, the first book I ever read, This Rough Magic, which takes place in Greece, I've probably read that book 15 times. It just I don't know why, but that her books and the plot just did something for me. And it's different because she was writing in the 1950s, a 1950s heroine. And now I'm here writing a heroine in the 1950s, but from a totally different standpoint. And the first thing, as soon as Cleo became complicated enough to have her own thoughts, she started rebelling against the time. So yeah, I think that the Mary Stewart and that weird kind of genre that didn't last very long, but I don't know, it led to some more cultural things Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier is sort of considered romantic suspense, I guess.
Mhm.
But also on a more personal note, this is not the first book that I've written. And I have actually, like, there was just this time in my life when I was applying and querying and trying to get a job and just like sending out parts of myself that were really vulnerable and intimate into the world and never hearing back. Or like, basically her failure when she doesn't get the internship is quick, and she does not react to it the same way that I do. And the way that I reacted to it, it was just kind of like, I guess this is just, I just keep sending out these, applications until maybe sometime day I will finally get a job. So her reaction and her rebellion against what is probably more unjust of a rejection than all the ones that I received. It was sort of like, I don't know, like I just wanted to see what somebody who was really feisty would do with a rejection like that.
So it's almost like you wrote your quasi mentor in a sense. It's like you kind of want to be her.
I look up to her in a lot of ways, and I think she's so stupid in so many ways. But yeah, in a way, it was a little bit of like a fantasy. I was like, I wish she's very, whether or not she is qualified for this internship, but whether or not she's like the most qualified person is sort of never really answered. There could be other more qualified people who are also male. Mm-hmm. That's not the person who ended up getting this internship. For me, I don't have that. She immediately was like, I deserved it and I didn't get it. That's not something that happens in my mind. I'm like, oh, other people must have deserved it more than me.
Yeah, but it's so funny that you said that, because like a lot of internships come through nepotism. Like they come through like someone like, were you laughing?
Yeah, you're right. It's because you're right. Like, no, keep going.
No, it's like a lot of internships come from this type of personality who like who's able to walk into a room and say, I deserve this. Who has that tenacity, right?
Yeah, the nepotism thing. I mean, that's something that's been I've been, writing this for a couple of years. And in the last couple of years, that's something that has been sort of exposed and in the newspaper. And I think that definitely probably informed my plot on some level.
Yeah, I guess the term Nepo baby is now in our consciousness, I guess, right? And in the mainstream. Yeah. Landing on third base, I guess, or second base as a term, like you started life on second base or third base. Yeah. So, but that's just part of the game, right? Like someone like I worked in the film industry. It's like I knew nobody, right? And it's just that. So you have to start at the bottom.
Do you think that the film industry, I mean, does it have these same kinds of, I don't know, weaknesses where, I don't know. So do you see nepotism in your field as well?
Oh my God. It's like, I can go on for 10 minutes about it. Yeah. Well, everybody from the crew standpoint, everybody's family members, right? So it's a very much a family industry. And in terms of film festivals, yeah, like you see it all the time, right? Like even getting into film schools, right? Like it's just the world that we live in, right? Like it's just all about who you know. It's all about who's writing that reference letter, who's writing that basically who can get you the job. Like I started like I was a cone person in the industry. I started 12 o'clock at night and basically stay on the street. So then the trucks that poured in at 8 o'clock in the morning had a path, right? In downtown Toronto. Wow. Nobody who worked in the film industry who knew somebody was doing that job, right? So yeah, and it's not like my education. I had a pretty good education too, right? So, but yeah, I think it's like that in any industry. Lawyers, like doctors get the best internships. So I think it's just part of life. It's just part of like, capitalistic Western world, I guess. I'm sure it's like that in your industry too, right?
Yeah. The things that when I started writing this book, I had just moved. I was a high school teacher for many years, like 10 or 11.
Yeah.
And then I moved to a new city, and it was during the pandemic, and I applied for a million jobs, and I had a master's. So I was, applying for like adjunct positions, and I just applied for jobs for about 8 months. And I didn't know anybody. I mean, I was just like a thing on the internet that people didn't know. And eventually when I did get a job, it was just like picked out of a hat, I guess. And I work for the local community college in Austin now, teaching composition 1 and 2. But it like, I think, I don't know, but I think that all of that could have been truncated if I just knew anybody's name, just anybody's name who I was sending all these applications to.
Yeah. But maybe I'm an idealist by saying this, but maybe it's the person that you are is is better because of it. You know what I mean? I don't want to try to sound flaky, but basically you're a better writer maybe because of it.
I had to learn something well, this is the same with Cleo. I had to learn something that I never really had to learn before, which was just massive failure. I mean, it just feels like failure. That lasted for a long time. And I was also querying a book, a nonfiction book. I got my master's in nonfiction writing, and it's like, it was sort of a weird hybrid book. I understand why nobody wanted to like take this book on, because it's like food and memory and a little bit of like stories from my life, but then maybe stories from history. It's just kind of weird. But yeah, I queried it also at the same time for like a year. And that felt like a really big failure when I didn't like get any offers of representation. I don't know. It was just like also kind of like mostly crickets. So it definitely, I mean, I'm a stronger person, and Cleo never would have been born if that hadn't happened. Like that was around the time while I was still doing all of that. That's when I started the first draft of this novel.
So yeah, so you're kind of like you're writing your emotions, you're writing what you know, you're writing, so. And you're setting it in an interesting time, right? Like you're setting it in like where this character has like her stakes are more complicated than your stakes, right? Where like you have to be a man, right? So she just becomes a man, I guess.
Yeah. And I also, so she is definitely the main character, and it's first person. Everything that the reader digests is in some way, through her eyes. But there is another like kind of main character, the guy that she's pretending to be, Ash. He doesn't really make it that far into like, I think he might not be in the submission at all, like the first chapter.
Yeah.
But he is kind of the other side of the coin, because he gets everything that he wants, even when he doesn't want it. Like things are thrown at him, and he has all these expectations from his family. So I like their contrast. And it wasn't just like, I don't know, he made it more complicated for me, because through his perspective, I got to like think about and see what would it be like if you had things thrust at you. Maybe you didn't even want them, and like your identity was being sort of superimposed on you by people around you.
Yeah, that makes sense 100%. So how long did it take you to like, and kind of like a basic question, but how long did it take you to write this, like the first draft of your novel?
Okay, so this is what was submitted to you, and I'm working through still the second draft.
Okay.
But depending on how it's either the second full draft, but also like kind of the fifth or sixth draft of like the beginning. But the first draft, I did the thing where I just like kept on going, even though things changed as I went. So I do have a complete first draft. It's just shy of 80,000 words. And I started it in November of, I think it took me just shy of a year to do the first draft.
Okay.
And now it's taken me, I've started this draft like in earnest at the beginning of this year. I took a little while just to build my lesson plans and like kind of like let it rest and think about it. So
Yeah,
I guess I've been with this project for a year and a half active writing, and then maybe like 2 years total.
gotcha. And so basically said you like, so it's all about the rewriting process, right? So it's like you get it on the page and then you have to, it's like finessing it, kind of removing, adding, I guess.
Yeah, there's this writing book. It's not really a craft book. It's kind of like a process book, and the title is sort of I don't know, ominous. It's called "Refuse to Be Done," and the guy who wrote it, Matt Bell, he's also a teacher and a writer. But he talks. He basically like walks a writer through 3 drafts, like what his 3 drafts usually mean to him, and it's very non-prescriptive. It's just kind of like, here's some stuff that you can think about. And I'm not doing all of it, but one thing I did do with the second draft, he says rewrite it. Don't just like edit it. So I like open a new document, and sometimes I would like refer to my first draft. But what happened with the first draft, especially because coming from a nonfiction background, I am very familiar with the first person, but it's always just me. I don't have to worry about like voice and stuff, or like being somebody else's mind. And I don't think I really hit the place where I was Cleo's, or I understood Cleo's mind and like how it even worked until the end of the first draft.
Gotcha.
So I didn't know for sure. I like got his book. I was like, well, that sounds really intense and maybe not worth it. But it did end up being worth it for me, because she only in the second draft is like she kind of like coming through more.
So you're right. Do you always write in the first person?
No, so this is my third project, my third completed draft of a thing. My first one was the nonfiction, and it was in first person. The second one was a young adult fantasy book, which never even got to the place where I was really querying it, and it was in the third person.
Gotcha. And so, but those are all 3 of them are done, or like you can show
All
it.
3 of them. One of the first one is like very done as anything in my entire life will ever be, the nonfiction. The second one is still, I think it's in like the resting place. It's been through 2 drafts, but I would put it through another one before I sent it out in the world, maybe 2 more, because it was the first novel I ever wrote ever. But then this one, yeah, all of them have been completed in some kind of a way.
So what motivated you to like to submit? I think you submitted through Submittable, correct? And
Yeah.
what motivated you to submit like through or like our contest or other festivals? Like you just looking for feedback? Are you looking to see what reactions? I'm just curious.
I haven't submitted this novel to anybody else but you.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, but the feedback, when you said in their industry feedback, I was like, that sounds great. Because for the last, 2 years, it's been like I've been working kind of alone in a room, and I don't know, not a whole lot of other eyes have seen this, and it's at a point where I am really grateful to like see how it hits people, because it's, I think by the end of this draft it'll be ready to like kind of go out in the world, maybe.
Yeah.
So the industry feedback really sold me, and I don't know, I just liked the festival. How there were many different types of writing, and how there were different modes, and how, it was so much fun to hear the voice artist do my first chapter.
Yeah.
Her accent for Marcy, I just like, it was so good, and she sounded so snobby. I don't know. I liked I guess like the cross discipline or cross genre sort of aspect of the festival.
Yeah, so that's Val Cole you're talking about. We don't talk. I don't talk about her enough, but she's a Audible. She does Audible books, and yeah, she's fantastic.
It was
Yes,
fun.
I'm glad you liked it. Yeah, yeah, she's an interesting human being too. So I've known her for a long time, but yeah, she really liked this your novel too. I think the person who gave you your coverage liked that's why we're talking, but they really liked your novel too. So that tells me something. Like I'm an outsider, I'm a facilitator, and I just like I'm like, okay, there's something here. There's something here in your novel. If like two pros are kind of like championing your novel, and Val had no issue, like she had no questions, no qualms, like even doing the recording of it. She enjoyed every second of it.
That is uh, really fun to hear because, yeah, I don't know. Thank you for telling me that.
Yeah, because we don't know you, right? So it's like it's always good to hear somebody like who
Yeah,
doesn't know you, for yeah,
you,
just knows like your name and the book that you wrote, right? So
yeah, you guys picked me out of a hat.
yeah, well that's what you said before, right? About the job, but basically,
Yeah.
but that's what it's no, but we didn't though. We didn't pick you out of a hat because you basically you proved your worth, right? Like we reject a lot more than we accept, right? So it was a script that was the first chapter that was ready. So it was deemed ready. So
Awesome.
it's the exact opposite of picking you out of a hat.
Good.
So so congratulations. I hope it does what serves you well, like on other things. I don't know if you want to get it, send it out to other people. Obviously, it's a good to have having awards and laurels. It kind of like legitimizes where you're at, I guess, too, right?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to use y'all's name on my query letter. I mean, tentatively in October when I send that out to whoever in the world I send it to, it's gonna say Wild Sound Festival on it.
So tell me about Austin Community College. You're a professor?
Yeah, and I worked in a high school for a really long time. And so now I teach dual credit. So my students I'm teaching college credit and high school credit simultaneously.
Gotcha.
And my students are high school students, mostly juniors, some seniors, and it's just a lot of fun. There are things, especially in Texas. I do not want to go down this rabbit hole too much, but public education in Texas is problematic for a lot of a lot of reasons. And it's just getting worse with like the libraries and the book bans and the control. But I work for the community college and I get more freedom to create my curriculum than I ever had before. Like instead of you have to teach this book to these kids that was written in the late 1500s, it's when the students are done with your classroom, they need to be able to research and write expository papers. So I and they are judged on whether they can do the skills. So yeah, I don't know. I'm having fun like letting the students' interests, like cultivating them. They get to pick what they research instead of I'm telling them they have to research some kind of author because somebody told me to tell them that. Uh, yeah, I don't know. It's fun I like collaborating. That was the other thing that really appealed to me about your festival. It just felt like other people were going to be able to like work on something that I've been working on. And I like working with people like writers who are learning. The revision, I spend a lot of time revising, and I also spend a lot of time revising with my students, having them revise, because I feel like that's where all the learning happens, like between the first draft and the end. Because after the first draft, there are things that I know that the students can like work on to improve. So there's a lot of revision. I have a lot of fun. I think some of the students have fun.
Well, the English language is not easy, and I think what you do is amazing, and I'm sure that there's some drafts that you get are like very could like spelling errors and grammatically incorrect, even though in the world that we live in you can kind of fix those things, but it's tough, right? And I think it holds people back. I think that from a creativity and an expression level, that people get daunted by the structure, get daunted by just like someone putting a red pen through all their work, I guess, right? And what you I guess you have to do, which is that because you have to, but then if someone gains confidence as a writer, it's not that they're going to be like, the next novelist or a journalist. It's just that it just helps them express themselves more, if that makes sense. And I think that I saw it in high school too, where like people just got smart, creative people who are great storytellers, could talk to me, tell me a great story, but couldn't put pen to paper because they were scared of it. They were scared of that, of doing that.
Yeah, that fear, I like sometimes it's on purpose and sometimes it's not. But I like making a mistake on the board, like a public mistake in my classroom really early on. And then a student will correct me. And I don't know, I like to set the expectation that we learn from mistakes. And then I will thank them and be like, thank you. And we're all like learning together. And that slap on the wrist for, oh, you made a spelling mistake, that I've also, when I was a high school teacher, I would teach other high school teachers how to use writing in different content areas as like assessment, but also like as a tool for thinking. And those teachers, these are, you know, very educated people, like a math teacher who knows physics. I don't know physics. And they would just tell me they're bad writers. And I'm like, you haven't written anything yet. I'm sure that you're not, like, and what, I don't know. I've seen so many people crippled by that fear. And it's something that's, by the time I get my students, they are also on some level crippled by that fear, but not as much as like the people who are my contemporaries. They'll have PhDs in something super impressive like neuroscience, and they'll just like, they learn that I'm like a writer, a writing teacher, and they'll get stressed out. They won't want to like speak because they're afraid that I'm gonna correct their grammar.
There's some, what happens is that, I'm not saying it's for everybody, but sometimes you get bad teachers who are very like insecure themselves and they like to throw judgment at the students. And it's easy to throw judgment at grammar and spelling, like, look what you did, blah, blah, blah. And then you just feel insecure, right? Like, cause it's like,
Yeah.
like teachers are supposed to, like, I'm sounding like a cliche, but they're supposed to inspire, not judge, right? So
Yeah. I've learned some from teaching those teachers, you know, back when I was a high school teacher. I learned something. I don't judge those teachers anymore either, because I learned that they were taught that way. They don't have any other, like, I don't know, that's the only schema that was ever given to them. And a lot of them are also just like kind of hurt from it. I don't know. It's a weird kind of perpetual. I kind of think teachers should be taught how to teach more.
yeah, well, yeah. and perhaps like, the best and the brightest is the mantra should be a little bit used a little bit more, and like in terms of salary. Have more incentive to be a teacher, right? So if
Oh yeah.
there's a bump in salary, right? So you can actually have a good living, make it like, live a good life. that would be
Yeah.
helpful too, right?
I can get behind that.
Yeah.
Yes,
No, you know what
that's
I mean,
definitely
right?
true.
Like, yeah. But yeah, like a lot of people, like a lot of teachers don't know how to teach. It's the math teacher is the great, you know, the great metaphor sometimes, where they're like, can't you see it on the board? It's like, so it's easy for them to figure out the equation because they're a math teacher. They have, the PhD or whatever they have to teach that, but or to be in the room, I guess, to teach that. But it's so easy for them. It's hard to like tell somebody how to do something when it's easy for somebody else, right? It's like the great athlete. The great athletes aren't the coaches or the managers, because like Michael Jordan isn't the coach of a basketball team because it was too easy for him. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
it's hard for him to teach something when it comes natural to him, right? So
that was a lesson I didn't know when I started teaching. My first year, because I mean, I became an English teacher because I loved reading, I loved writing, and it never was something that I felt a barrier. And my first year teaching, I was teaching in a middle school where 90% of the students, English was their second language. And then I would just like put something on the board. I don't know what it was. Or we would read, a poem, and I'd be like, see? And they're like, we don't see. I mean, I had to learn that just like, yeah, showing people isn't the same as teaching. And it was not a lesson that in my training to become a teacher, I had never really been that to learn it my first year. I think it was painful for everybody involved, me and the students.
yeah. Well, you got to learn too, right? It's like you
Yeah.
got to do something first, right? So yeah, it's like you always suck at the first time you do something, right? So
Yeah.
including
Like a
writing,
first
right? So
draft.
Yeah, exactly. The first
I'm
draft.
glad that you didn't read that one.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. It's just a great, it's a great first, it's a great novel. There's a lot of good metaphors, even in today's world. It kind of like there's a great parallel to what's happening even today that in your novel as well. So yeah, there's lots of great themes and it's a first person journey, of course, almost a coming of age story, but at the same time, there's a lot of extra layers in your novel as well. So I wish you the ultimate best of
Well,
success.
thank you so much. Thank you. This whole experience has been so fun and educational for me.
Thank you. Well, let's talk again soon then.
Okay.